Editing photos is a bit like the first day back at work after a holiday. It's the reality after the fun. But why does something that's supposed to enhance your work make you dread it? We want to be outside taking photos, not sat at a desk, endlessly dragging sliders, culling images, never feeling like we're getting to that point where it's done, it's finished. This will help you fix that. Not by teaching you Lightroom or similar, but showing you why it's so painful and how to change that so that you can actually enjoy it again. So what's the real problem? The problem isn't that you hate editing. The problem is that you hate the chaos around it. The fact that there's probably hundreds, maybe even thousands of unedited, disorganized images sat on your hard drive and in your Lightroom catalog that are all crying out for your attention. The fact that there's no real workflow beyond importing your photos and then editing the ones that you remember to be the best shots from that particular trip or session. And when you are working on those images, you're making endless changes and tweaks, trying to get it just right, which basically leads to this feeling that you're never really finished. So how do we tackle these problems? You need to cut the chaos. I made a video a couple of months ago about selling a bunch of my gear, basically because the more gear I had, the more overwhelmed I felt by choice and the choices I had to make whenever I went out shooting photos. I think in modern life, a lot of us are overwhelmed by choice. And when it comes to photo editing, that's no different. The more images you have in front of you that seemingly need editing, the more overwhelmed you're going to feel and the less likely you're going to feel able to tackle them. So there's two ways around this. And the first one is to change how you shoot. I don't think this is helped much by modern digital cameras, especially the newest ones, some of which shoot up to 120 shots per second. Having to cull those must be an absolute nightmare. In last week's video, I used my X100VI as if I was using a film camera. And the reason I did that was to build more discipline in how I shot. I'm sick of going home with too many photos to go through. So this was a way of trying to think a bit more about when I pressed the shutter button, and more importantly, when I didn't. The comments in that video ranged from, "This is a great idea, I'm going to try this," to, "I don't really get this." The ones that said I don't really get this tended to be ex-film shooters. They grew up shooting on film, so they built that discipline in when they learned photography. They carried that forward into shooting on digital, so are probably not faced with a similar problem that learning on digital brings, where there is seemingly no limits. You can shoot anything and everything. And shooting in that way often leads to just having far too many images. The second way is to get better at culling your images, deleting your images off your hard drive. You can do this up front, and I've heard of people deleting them in camera when they know they've taken a shot that they're never going to do anything with. To me, feels a bit dangerous. That, in some cameras especially, that delete all option is far too close to the delete single frame option. And I don't like deleting in camera. It just feels risky. You can opt not to import all your images into Lightroom when you put your memory card in your computer. I'm not a big fan of this, mainly because it seems slow. It's slower to go through the images, pick which ones you want to import and which ones you don't. And I find it easier and quicker to import all of them and then do this when you're in the Lightroom catalog. Now, what's important is to do this straight away, because the danger is if you leave it, it just won't get done. So have a quick scan through your images and work out what you can delete there and then. Any images that are duplicates, any images that are out of focus or have got motion blur or something like that. I also find that when I take a series of images of the same subject, it's usually the last one that's the best one, and all the ones before that can usually go. And I often mark the ones that can go with a rejection flag, which you can do by pressing X. And I'll go a bit more into my process for flagging and culling a little bit later, because there is an even easier way of doing this. In cutting the chaos, you've got to remember that overwhelm comes from avoiding making decisions. And we often avoid making those decisions because there's just too many to make. By reducing that number of decisions, that overwhelm will subside as well, leaving you feeling freer to edit your photos. Next up, we need to build a workflow that works for us. Now, I can only comment on how I use Lightroom, and elements of this will work for other people and some won't. So just take what you need and see what works for you. And the most important thing around this is to make your workflow as simple and as easy to follow as possible, because as soon as we start to overcomplicate things, they tend to fall by the wayside and we just fall back into our old, easy to pick up habits of not being organized. So try and organize like a professional. Have a folder structure that you can stick to. I keep mine really simple. It's done by year, and then each year is broken up into month. And it's not much beyond that. If I've gone on a particular trip, then that will be inserted into that particular month when the trip's fallen. And that's it, really. That's how my folder structure is organized. It's easy to keep on top of, and it's easy to move photos into the right folders where they belong. I then use collections and smart albums. And I've probably neglected this for too long. It's something I've only started doing a bit more recently, but this helps me find specific photos really easily. And this is really helpful as I move forward, as I shoot more, to get images together that are potentially going to form part of projects at a later date. It's really easy to do this. You can just select the photos you want, hit the little plus in collections, and create a new collection, which will automatically bring those selected images into it. It's really easy to add images later as well. You just literally click, drag, and drop them in. Some people like to use keywording. I'm not the biggest fan of this because I think it overcomplicates things and I'm less likely to do it, so I can't be consistent with it. And if you're not consistent with it, there's not a whole lot of point in doing it. I find that my collections do this job for me, and any images that belong together, I can create a collection for them. For example, bus stops, and keep all my favorite bus stop images in a nice neat folder. I do use starring for my images as well, and I tend to only use 3, 4, or 5 stars. You can star an image by pressing the relevant number on the keyboard, so 3, 4, or 5. My 3-star images are images that I see as being good enough to post on Instagram, for example. 4-star images are what I deem to be really good images, and 5-star images are my best images. Sometimes I go through these and images get reallocated depending on how I feel about them. But I think that's a way of keeping track of my favorite images that I've taken. The second part of having a workflow that works is to use presets. I think we need to remove this kind of guilt and negative narrative that using presets seems to have built up over the last few years. Presets are so useful, and they're such a massive time saver. I've got between 5 and 7 presets that I commonly use, and I use these to start editing, I'd say 95% plus of my images. Now, they don't always work, and I feel like the best comparison I can make is, imagine like golf clubs. You wouldn't use a driver to hit a 50-yard shot into a green over a bunker, and similarly, you wouldn't use a putter to tee off on a par 5. Sorry if you don't play golf and don't know what on earth I'm talking about. But what I'm saying is presets need to be thought of like tools, and you pick a specific tool for a specific job. So whereas one preset might work for one photo, it probably won't work for another photo. And that's just something you need to work out. You need to work out which presets work on which photos, and the more you use them, the more you'll get an idea of which photos they work on. I'd recommend to everyone that you build your own presets based around how you like to edit. It's really easy to do. Once you've done an edit on an image that you like, you can just save that by clicking the plus in presets and saving it as a new preset, and then you can apply that to any other image in the future. Now, I wouldn't recommend just applying a preset and leaving it there. Use it as almost like a base, and then tweak it from there, because each image is different. Having the same preset applied to all your images just isn't going to work. You need to tweak them slightly to suit each image. Like I say, this is a time saver, not a shortcut. I have finally made my presets available on my website. Now, I would recommend to everyone that you try and make your own presets, but I think having other people's presets is a really good starting point if you're not sure what you're doing. I bought loads of presets back in the day to learn how people edited their photos, to learn what people did to their photos to get a certain look and to get certain colors. They're a really good tool to understand how to edit. And if you apply my presets to your images, you might end up just getting images that look like my images, which is why it's important to use them as a base and then to tweak accordingly. As I've only just launched these are on sale at the moment, and they will remain on sale for the rest of the month. So the link's in the description below, and I'd be keen to know how people get on with them. Final bit of having a workflow that works is to go mobile. This applies mostly to Lightroom users because as part of the Lightroom Creative Cloud package, you get Lightroom Mobile that you can put on a tablet or on a phone. You can then sync your images, generally from the collections element, from Lightroom on your computer to your mobile device. Now, I absolutely love doing this primarily for culling images. What I do whenever I import a load of images, I put them all in a collection and I call that collection to edit. I will then, at a time that suits, when I'm chilling out on the sofa or when I've got time to kill on a train or something like that and I don't want to waste it doom scrolling, I'll go to Lightroom and I'll just cull some images. And it's so easy to do on a tablet or a phone because you can just swipe left and right through the images and you can swipe up to pick and down to eject. And it's that simple. It's such a quick and easy way of going through your images and culling the ones that you don't need anymore. On that note, with culling, you need to be ruthless and you need to be decisive. And I know that's hard. I know we can think that, oh, I might want that image again one day. You've got to be realistic and think, well, I'm going to take better images than that in the very near future. And if you're not ruthless and decisive, you just end up with a backlog of images that in however many years' time, you'll wish you got rid of ages ago. Doing it on mobile is a great way of being able to step away from the desk where most of us spend a lot of our lives. It breaks that desk-bound monotony. One of my recent coaching clients had editing as a real block in his workflow, and a lot of that stemmed from the amount of images he had to go through and cull. He had quite a long commute to work, and we suggested this as a way of getting through it, and it worked an absolute treat. And now editing is nowhere near as much of a problem and a bottleneck for him as it was before. Once you've got your workflow sorted, editing feels a lot less daunting. Know when enough is enough. Over editing is just perfectionism in disguise. I'd say try and limit yourself to like 3 to 5 minutes on editing a photo. Maybe a little bit longer if it's genuinely one of your better photos. I think the most amount of time I spend on any particular photo is about 10 minutes, and I don't do that very often. Stopping at 80% edited and walking away is also a really valuable thing to do. The amount of times I've edited a photo to what I think is completion and then walked away and come back to it the next day, which is a really good tip, by the way, because once we look at something with fresh eyes, we see things that we can't necessarily see when we're in the weeds editing, so to speak. Yeah, I come back to it the next day and it's just over edited and I have to pull everything back slightly. And I think that's why 80% is a really good stopping point. If it's good enough to post, it's generally good enough to just leave it there. Now, there are some images that will benefit from greater editing, and a lot of the high-level pros spend a lot longer than this editing their images. It's fine to do this on the best of the best images, but only you will know which those images are, and it's up to you also to pick those images selectively, because it's spending too much time on too many images that will be harming you in the long run when it comes to keeping on top of your editing. We need to let go of these ideas of this is the last good image I'll take, so I need to edit it loads, or this is the best image I've ever taken, so I need to edit it loads. There's always going to be more images, and we have to remember that done is always better than perfect. You'll get better at knowing how to approach your editing on an image by image basis over time. You'll know which ones to spend a little bit more time on. You'll know which ones just will suit a preset and then a slight tweak. But it's only by getting over all of the initial overwhelm and getting to this point that you're actually going to learn that and be able to get on top of it. We need to make editing fun again. Editing has got this narrative around it of being hunched over a desk late at night, image after image after image after image. It doesn't need to be like that. Make it more fun. Put on some music or a podcast, or even have your favorite film going in the background while you're editing. Maybe combine it with something else you like, a nice glass of red wine or a whiskey or massive cigar, something like that. Just bring more pleasure to it by combining it with something else you enjoy. Use mobile editing to your advantage and step away from the desk into environments that you might feel better editing in, whether that be on the sofa or in a garden or in the park or on the train or a coffee shop. Use that to your advantage. And then finally, do it at a time that suits you. If you know that you mostly enjoy editing between 9 and 10 at night, do it then. Don't try and do it in the middle of the afternoon when maybe you'd be better doing something different. Captain Obvious here with the truths. That one almost seems too obvious to include, but we often try and make ourselves do things when we don't necessarily want to do them. So I think the most important takeaways from this are to be intentional, not just with knowing which images to edit and culling your images, but also with shooting to start with and limiting the number of shots you're actually taking forward to be edited. Don't not shoot just so you don't have too much editing to do. Keep shooting. Just try and be more mindful as you're doing it. And then get organized and have a workflow. To me, this is probably the hardest bit because I am inherently disorganized and I actively fight against organization, but it really works. It makes sense of the chaos, and having that system to work through, it feels like it makes it a little bit more automatic. There's less choices to make, so it just makes it easier. And then finally, perfection. It doesn't exist, so don't chase it. I really hope that's helped some of you who struggle with editing. I'd love to know what you struggle with the most. Drop a comment below and let me know. If you like stuff like this, you might be interested in my newsletter. There's a link to that below as well. And also, this is the kind of stuff I've been going through, as I said, with my coaching clients, helping them to find more joy in what they're doing, removing the bottlenecks, looking at things like perfectionism and procrastination, and just helping people to reconnect with passions and get more into that creative life that they crave. There's a link to the waitlist for my next cohort below as well. There's also the link to the presets below. And until next time, when I'll probably talk about the changes to the space behind me, I'll see you then.